This is going to be a long-winded rant about the 16 personalities. The 16 personalities are a categorization system made by the Myers-Briggs Type Indicators, right? With 16 distinct types of people that this kind of seeks to put people into. Now, personally, I don't find MBTI by itself to be that amazing of a theory. I know a lot of people have heard of it. A lot of people use this on exams. I know, for example, in my blueprint, they use that to kind of determine your learning style or your working style. And while it's fun in a way, it certainly ignores a lot of the aspects and different details of, well, real life. However, MBTI does have a much better purpose when you combine it with its function. So let's quickly explain that. The first idea of MBTI is obviously the personality types themselves, which is a four-letter system. The first one can be extroverted or introverted, E or I. The second can be intuitive or sensing, N or S. The third can be T or F, thinking or feeling. And the fourth one can be judging or prospecting, J or P. Now, the original MBTI system categorizing these just gives everyone one of the options for all four of the letters. For example, you could have a INTJ or an ESFP. You could have an ESFJ. You could have an ENTJ. Basically, these combinations would kind of determine what a person was like. But the issue with MBTI in this regard is that it ignores too much of the minutiae of regular life, right? Sure, people can be extroverted or introverted, but there's no way you can only keep to yourself forever. And there's no way you can be a social, monkey all the time. That's not possible. You can't always be out there. You can't always be inside. You have to have a balance of everything. The same for all three of the other things. Judging and prospecting, for example, talks about how people plan ahead. But the issue is that, well, you can't always be adapting to a new situation. You have to plan for the future eventually. And you can't always just plan because new situations arise no matter what. Therefore, JMP, well, you need both anyway. That's a central issue with MBTI. However, the good thing is that I'm not sure who, but someone made a system called cognitive functions. Let's start with extroverted thinking, or TE. TE is the primary function of ENTJs and ESTJs. TE basically thinks in a way where they see existing systems all across the world around them, realizes where they are deficient, and uses own theories to change them or impact them in some way. TE seeks to impact the world around them and often manifests in ambitious goals. So both ENTJs and ESTJs use this to try and change existing external systems to fit their own will. Now, TE often manifests in a lot of leaders, such as Napoleon, if you know who that is, who, for example, it was an amazing war leader, but TE does deny a lot of the other feeling-related aspects of humanity, which is a bit of an issue and can sometimes lead them to further problems. Next, I'll discuss TI. TI is the introverted thinking, which is different from extroverted thinking in a few ways. Introverted thinking, instead of starting at an external system and then using their own theory to change it, TI starts from their own theories, from their own knowledge. They seek to use external systems to validate their own knowledge. So they go from theory to theory instead of system to theory to system. Now, what this means is that TI is often a lot less ambitious and a lot less community-oriented than TE happens to be because it's very introverted, it's very personal. The two personality types that use TI the most as their dominant function are ISTPs and INTPs. Both of them are categorized similarly in the kind of a scientist mechanic tinkering rule, where they do things for the sake of their own understanding rather than for a unified bigger system like TE would do. Both of these have their benefits. TI is one of the greatest functions for scientists, especially, for example, Albert Einstein, who used TI to create many of his unifying theories. How does he do that? Well, because TI validates only theories. It doesn't try to change systems already existing. It sees the systems objectively and uses that to validate their own theories. So TI often is used to create logical ideas. One interesting thing about functions is that if someone has extroverted thinking as their thinking function, they will always have introverted feeling. And if someone has introverted thinking as their function, they will always have extroverted feeling as their feeling function. This is to balance out the two types of judging. We'll talk about a little of that later. Let's start with extroverted feeling as the first feeling function. Extroverted feeling is similar to extroverted thinking in a way where it impacts the world around them. Extroverted feeling makes decisions based off how are my actions affecting the feelings of others? How am I affecting the social balance of people? FE cares deeply about harmony, trying not to upset people just because they can. And FE tries to make everyone basically as balanced and fair as possible. Now, FE is a very objective-ish feeling, even though feelings are inherently subjective. FE tries to take things and make them as best as possible. What I mean by this is that a lot of FE users will, for example, sacrifice their own comfort for someone else's gain. Extroverted feeling also is categorized by some people calling them manipulators because, well, they're able to very easily understand the feelings of others and change them in the ways of their own will, but I personally don't see that. The two personality types that use FE the most are ENFJs and ESFJs. These are both ones that are very community-oriented, often are yes people who just can't say no to when someone offers them a favor. And that's a benefit of FE. It's genuinely empathetic and cares about a lot of people, even though it could be used for nefarious means. Introverted feeling, or FI, is different from FE in many ways, because while FE cares deeply about the community and everyone around them, and is willing to sacrifice their own ideals for a greater good for a lot of people, FI is more self-oriented in a way. Instead of thinking, how do my actions affect the feelings of everyone around me, their first reaction is to think, how is the environment making me feel? FI is usually way better at self-reflection and understanding their own motivations than FE does, as FE requires people to give them validation and meaning to their function. FI creates meaning in itself, and FI is not willing to, for example, help a group if they know that what they're doing is wrong. FI will almost always stick to their own values and refuse to corrupt their morals for any purpose. Now, FI, as I mentioned earlier, all the feeling and thinking functions are paired extroverted, introverted. So someone who has introverted thinking, like an INTP, will always have extroverted feeling, will generally care more about the community around them, making sure everyone is happy and doesn't like to disappoint. Whereas someone with extroverted thinking will more likely have introverted feeling. Goes the other way around too. Someone with introverted feeling will probably have TE, because someone who cares more about their own values, their own ideals, are more likely to be ambitious and want to push their agenda into the systems of the world. Now let's go on to the sensory functions, the functions that are perceive the world, because the ones we've all talked about, TE, TI, FE, FI, are all judging functions, are all functions that people use to make decisions, either to help a community or their own values, or to change external systems, or to build their own understanding. These are all decision-making functions. The other four are information functions, and these are just as impactful as the judging functions. The perceiving functions are SE, SI, NE, and NI. We'll start with SE. SE is extroverted sensing the world around them. Now, extroverted sensing takes things in usually decently objectively, as in they see everything that happens. They don't try to use personal experiences to try and change how they're seeing something. They see everything, and then they use that to mold into more personal values. The two personality types that use this function the most are ESFPs and ESTPs. Both of them are very good at understanding the world around them, adapting quickly to new situations because their eyes are always open. SE is the most observant type of them all. SE also deeply cares about new experiences, which is why SE will always seek to find new things to see, to understand, to learn, rather than the same old routine that they've done for a long time. Now we're going to go on to introverted sensing. SI, unlike SE, cares more about their own personal values and responsibilities. This is why SI will often use their experiences or what they've seen before to react or understand new situations, rather than using SE's constant observing of everything that is happening. In this way, SI is usually better at doing repeated tasks or following a routine, which is the opposite of what SE is good at, because SI is able to internalize all their observations into a machine of sorts. It's an idea that allows a lot of the two personality types that work with SI, which are ISTJ and ISFJ, to be able to very easily root themselves in their traditions and in their rules, and be able to create a system of ways that people should behave and how the environment should look. SI is very good for establishing order, but it doesn't like to adapt nearly as much as SE does. So let's start with NE, extroverted intuition. Extroverted intuition takes the understanding of the world, things that they use the sensory functions to see first, and puts them in a massive chaotic brainstorm, like a web, like a spider's web. Everything is interconnected, and they all have their own meanings. NE is very objective in its understanding, right? Things just happen because they happen. They're just there. And everything is there in this massive web, so that whenever they need to try something new, they can just pull on one of the ideas in their massive web. NE loves to experiment, especially the dominant NE users, which are ENTP and ENFP. These types will like to experiment or just play around and get to know more people or more events or understand new things just so they can build up their web of different ideas. The final function is introverted intuition, the rarest one, especially in the dominant form. Introverted intuition, or NI, is used very differently from NE because while NE tries to make things into a massive chaotic web, it's very disorderly and it doesn't make a lot of sense. It just exists, many of the ideas. Whereas NI tries to converge them into a singular abstract narrative that is subjectively valuable, not objectively valuable. What this basically means is that NI often manifests itself in eureka moments of just sudden understanding, which is what I've seen a lot of people describe it as. I'm not sure if that's perfectly true, but personally, I've experienced NI jumps in the moment, and it works pretty well. It's just a full understanding of an event that you didn't need to see everything, but you can fill in the gaps just by knowing where it's about to lead. Now, NI is very obsessed with predicting the future, understanding where things are about to go. They don't like the chaotic web. They don't like pulling on random ideas. They like a cohesive narrative, even if it's contradictory. NI is perfectly fine with contradictions because they all fuel the same idea. The two dominant NI users, INTJ and INFJ, are usually, especially portrayed in books and movies, are portrayed as these like fortune tellers, wizards, people who could predict the future, like Gandalf, for example, or Dumbledore, which you can see the INFJ in the background is kind of modeled after. These people are often considered this way because introverted intuition can manifest itself in incredibly long-term goals that are made to push their own values. In the end, I think that MBTI is good for just analyzing characters and sometimes people. But it's always important to keep in mind that everyone is different and that, especially if you only use the 4 letters, it can be very difficult to categorize someone into one of 16 types of people. The world would be too simple that way. Instead, just understand the different types of functions, what they all mean, the order that they exist in, and in the end, it's just a really good analysis tool. I'll be using it in the future, most likely.